Well, I'm glad everybody made it. I think I've met all of you, but I wanted to introduce Dr. Sen. And this is, so Dr. Sen, a lot of you already know. Oh, yeah, that's for, oh, you know what, it's missing a wheel, Elizabeth. Do you want to grab it? I don't want you to tip all over the place. And so for those of you who don't know Dr. Sen, he is our medical director here at School of Imagination. We're very lucky to have him with us. He's a board-certified pediatrician, a fellow of the American Academy of Pediatrics with over 20 years of experience working with children with autism. And he has a wonderful and vast knowledge of the research and the cutting-edge interventions for children on the spectrum, was trained at University of Washington in their autism center. So his knowledge base with our ESDM program is just a wonderful mixture, and we're able to work together very well with our families and try to bring them individualized programs that really help their kids specifically. And Dr. Sen brought us the Early Start Denver model about 5 years ago and said, this is what we need to do. And I trusted him 100%, and he's been absolutely on target the whole time. So what we're going to do tonight is, I'll just get my clicker going here. I was telling them we're recording it as well so that we have the voice explanations of all these different slides. And when we're going through and looking at this, this is what it looks like. I think you've all gotten possibly one trainual with introductory information. You're the only family that hasn't, but you'll get it tonight. So this trainual program is more of the online training. And so it lets you know, if you look over here, when you open it, you'll see all the subjects and you just click through them. And as you click next, it opens the next one. So tonight, or maybe you've already received this in your email, this training will be in your trainual as something you can refer back to. So we will get started. With that, we will get started. All I have to do is open this up. And so I'm not good with tech, and I have the wonderful Elizabeth, who's been helping me for the past 3 weeks. She's our intern from Athenian School here, and she has been helping me put together the trainuals for you guys and making sure that everybody gets everything they need. So her last day's tomorrow, though. I'm very sad about that, but she's awesome. So we call this a boot camp because it really is that. Basically when you're going through the ESDM program, you have to put on your ESDM goggles. You have to get a whole different mindset of when you're working with your kiddo, and because it lets you see the opportunities to work on their goals all throughout the day. So what we're doing tonight is I'm going to make you each talk, or at least each family talk, to tell us a little bit about yourself and your child. And then Dr. Sen's going to do an overview of autism and ESDM and why it works, as well as a little bit of screen time information. And then I was going to review the daily plan, focus time, focused activities, daily expectations, just so that we're all on the same page with that. And then the top tips for success, which is more strategies. So we'll talk about those. And then we'll talk about what's coming next for everyone. So at the end, we'll definitely do questions and answers. But if you have questions during, just raise your hand and we'll talk about it as we're going. So if you don't mind, I don't know who wants to start, but if you don't mind introducing yourself, letting us know your child's name, their age, and then any siblings, biggest challenge, and what you love most about your child. Okay. I'm going to pick you first because I know you're very confident.
Hey guys. My name is Anna. I'm sorry, I'm a little sick.
And you're a little sick. Should I put you on the spot?
My child's name is Ibrahim, and I have a 3-month-old. So I super pumped and ran over here. So the biggest challenge with my child is that he doesn't display any real signs of autism, but his biggest issue is he has a language delay, in which Charlie and I have talked countless amount of times that ESDM can actually really benefit him as well with developmental delays, and he was 3 months premature. So I think the hardest thing is that I think that he would be one of those kids that if he does have autism, he would slip through the cracks till later on in life, and then we might end up dealing with it. And so I would rather be on the
Front end.
the front end of it.
Yeah.
And so I'm here because he just has a really bad language delay, but he's been getting excellent help here, made great improvements, and so that's what I love about him. He's a fighter. He was born 3 months premature, 2 pounds, and he's been fighting since the day he was born, and he continues to fight for himself, and I'm Team Ibrahim all the way. So I'm hoping that with all of your guys' help and Charlene's help, I can catch him up and help him wherever he needs to be.
Awesome.
How
Thank
old?
you.
3 years old.
Ingrid, do you mind going next?
Sure. My name is Ingrid. My daughter is 2 years old. I guess the biggest challenge we've had, I think, is more her skills of independence, so dressing. She's hesitant to walk down the steps by herself, things like that. She always wants assistance, even though I think that she is capable of doing a little bit more. I think a lot of it is a lack of confidence, but it's hard for us to instill that confidence in her. What I love most about my daughter, she has an amazing sense of humor. Even before she could speak, she would, to me, it seems like she got the joke. She would look at you appropriately when things were funny and kind of laugh and don't you think that's funny too? And she is really musically inclined, and so she likes to play instruments or dabble at them, and she likes to look at me for approval and see that you really enjoy her music.
Thank you. Do you guys mind going next?
My name is Lisa, and this is Ron. We have twins, Nina and Logan, and they're 2.5. And I think in different ways, their biggest challenge is communication. And we get asked a lot of questions, so that's been the answer. And what I love most about my child, or both the children, I think they're both really curious in their own ways, and so I love that.
Yeah, even though they have autism, they're totally different. They both have strong personalities in different ways, so you can see their characters, and it's definitely,
They're fun.
something I love about them.
Awesome. Thank you. You guys mind going next?
So my name is Debolina. My husband, Ayan. Our son's name is Adrijo. He is 4 years old. He just turned 4. And he has no siblings. So the biggest challenge that we see with our son is definitely a language delay. So which has been improving with all the help that we are getting. He's in an IEP program and he's getting help there. So the language delay is getting addressed. And the other challenge, which seems a bigger challenge right now, is a problem with social interaction with peers. So he is not interested, in interacting with kids of his own age. He's very good with adults. He loves adult attention, and he even initiates and tries to attract people's attention and initiates interactions. But with kids of his own age, with peers, it's a problem. What we love most about our son, so many things which we love about him. The first thing that comes to mind is his very affectionate nature. So he's he's a very affectionate child with both of us and with familiar adults, grandparents, everyone else in the family. Very affectionate. The second thing is he is very musically inclined too. So he loves music and he learns best through music. And he loves to sing too. Would say that he is a good singer. He just needs to hear a song just once.
Oh, wow.
And he once or twice at the most, and then he starts singing it all by himself. So these things are, I would say, the best things we love about him.
Great. Thank you. Bridget, do you guys want to go next?
So I'm Bridget Kovacs, and this is my husband James. We have 3 children, Rose, who's 5, and then Thomas, who's 2, and Catherine. And Thomas, yeah, she's only 3 months. And Thomas is the one that was actually last week diagnosed with autism. I think I would say our biggest challenge is the speech delay. And then for what I love most about him, I'd say he's super easygoing. Just kind of has like a chill
Yes.
personality.
Thank you. He agrees. Patty, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure, my name is Patricia Mencos. I'm the school organization, and I'm here learning more about this model to help our wonderful kids and have fun with them.
Patricia works in our early intervention program, Little Sunshines, and so the more we know about ESDM, the better in there.
My name is Priya. I have 2 children. My oldest daughter, she's suddenly now 10 years old, and my son, Prana, 3 years old. My 3-year-old has been diagnosed with autism, and my biggest challenge with my child, I would say, is language delay and the sensory issues that come with autism.
Yeah.
What I love is his smile and his naughtiness.
That's a good thing sometimes. Hi.
Emotional before saying anything. My name is Sridev, and I have 4-year-old twins. Why? Because my boy is genius. He knows all his same shapes. He can dance to all Bollywood songs. He can recite slokas, but he's diagnosed with
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you. John and Norma, do you want to go next? Yeah.
Sure. My name's John. This is Norma. We have a almost 3.5-year-old daughter, Caroline, and our son, Robert, 21 months old. January 17th, he was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. So I totally understand the feeling. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
Our biggest challenge with Robert was just getting him to engage with us. He was always enjoyed music and running, but just wasn't, with us. And so the last few months since we knew there was an issue, we've been coming to every seminar we can and playing with him, and he's engaging with us a lot now. And so I think the biggest challenge at this point is he really struggles with imitation and with taking turns. So he's come a long way in a lot of respects. We feel like he's with us. We're having fun with him, but you can see the challenge with him just with, put your hands in the air.
He tries to, but you can feel that he's not.
Yeah, and so we're, right, and so what we love most about him is, I suppose, he's super playful. He's very loving, and we're enjoying that we've got him with us and we're having fun with him, and we're hoping that learning these techniques that we can help him overcome the issues that I think are going to come up with communication. I mean, he's language delayed too, but
Sure.
he wasn't speaking at all or answering to his name, and now he is answering to his name a little bit. He's got a couple of words, and so I think we're hoping that we're on the right track.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, and so we have 8 very different little people, 9. And so that's what's wonderful about ESDM is there's a basic core, core strategies that really work for the kids, but that it also we're individualizing for each child because their goals are so different. When you fill out your checklist, every single one is completely different from the next. So we want to make sure that the goals that we set and the strategies we use and the activities we use are specific for your child. And so as I get to know them more and Dr. Sen gets to know them more and their goals and the ESDM checklist, we will be able to dive in even more from just the general to the very specific and granular for your child. So we have a mixture of, over the next 12 weeks of these live trainings. So the next one I believe is April 18th. And then there's one at the end, and then you'll meet with me 2 more times, and then throughout I'll be sending you, and we'll be sending you different training modules and just letting you know some background information, but then what to do specifically each day. And so with that, I wanted to introduce Dr. Sen to tell us a lot about, autism, but also why ESDM works specifically so well for these kiddos to rewire their brain, and all the other things he will share with us. So I'm going to pass this to you, and I do have to give you the mic because it will listen to me, and not you. So I'm just going to put this on, and you can put that anywhere on your belt, maybe, and it's on ready to go.
I can put it in my pocket.
You can put it in your pocket. Perfect.
There you go. So I wanted to congratulate all of you for coming and making this commitment. Think of it as a college level course, and you'll come out of it learning a huge amount that will grow a long way in helping your child. And a little bit of background of why we invested in this class is based on research. So when Early Start Denver model was developed, and I happened to be lucky enough to be around when it's being developed as a collaboration between the Mind Institute and the UW Autism Center in the early 2000s. And then subsequently, the first research came out that it's a successful model in 2012. And subsequently, more research was done that validated for people like us who are in the field. We've always known that kids do better if their parents are very engaged in the child's care, as opposed to parents who drop their kids off at the therapist's speech or OTPT and then go to Starbucks or the grocery store, that those kids do better. And so the next generation of research studies came out in 2014. There's an astronomical difference between ESDM without parents versus ESDM with engaged trained parents. And that's how we started this journey of training parents. Some common myths about autism, and so I just wanted to make that clear. Autism is not just about talking, it's more has to do with communication, social or conversational. So 70% of kids with autism actually talk, even though from what I was hearing, a lot of your challenges are speech, but that's not true for most kids. And the symptoms start manifesting long before a child starts to talk. In today's science, we have the ability to suspect by 6 months and diagnose somewhere between 12 to 18 months. Where the science is going is that within the next 10 years, the science is already there to pick up test the brains of newborns, but it's not been perfected yet for wide application. So not every newborn is being tested at this present time, but pretty soon enough, we'll have the technology to be able to screen every baby born for the trait of autism and then start treatment as early as 4 to 6 months of age and have a great outcome. Most kids who talk well end up being diagnosed in middle school years because they talk and therefore nobody is concerned, and they get through elementary school years where the elementary school teacher as well as a vigilant parent is all over the homework and everything goes well, till they hit middle school when social challenges come into play as well as organizational skills, and everything falls apart, and then the kid's academics go down the toilet, and that's when the kid starts to suspect that there's a problem and gets evaluated and gets diagnosed. Hopefully within the next few years that issue will go away, I work at the Stanford Children's Health, where I'm part of the Quality Improvement Committee, where we're instituting system-wide screening tools so that we pick up every kid by the age of 3, which is what the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendation is, so that we do not end up with diagnosing kids in our adolescence. And as you will know, communication is not just talking. Communication is a reciprocal back and forth exchange of feelings and thoughts. And that's the core of autism. Now, before I move forward, I'll want to say this thing, especially when it comes to question and answer. I'll tell you, for Charlene and I, the number one question we typically get from parents is, my child does this or that or does not do this, and what do I do? Meaning, it's very easy for parents to fixate on certain behaviors and want to get rid of them, and our standard answer is you don't. Meaning, you do this whole ESDM, once you get a deeper understanding of it, your goal is not to get rid of behaviors you don't prefer your child not to have. It is very important as parents to understand why your child has certain behaviors or is not showing certain behaviors. It's because your child is not currently have certain skill sets, and then what happens when the child is missing certain skill sets, then the child's behavior comes out as what parents perceive as abnormal behavior. He's doing this, he's doing that, she's doing this. Well, once we give them those skill sets, then what happens with those undesirable behaviors is they slowly fade away. Okay. So I really will drill this into you, hopefully in the 12 weeks, that get rid of wanting to get rid of some behavior. Instead, focus on what skill sets we need to give your children, and the ESDM curriculum checklist that you started working on will guide you along those lines, and that way you'll instill in your child the skill sets that he or she needs, and then you'll one day notice 6 months later, it's like, wow, those behaviors I used to worry about are slowly going away. Okay. With that, so autism is currently defined as a set of behaviors, even though we at this present level of science, we detect them as behaviors, but there is now increasing scientific data of the connectivity of inside the brain being not quite ideal, which is why these behaviors come up. And what science has also shown that with ESDM, clearly very fascinating science, that the brain actually rewires itself, allowing the kid to acquire skill sets that he or she doesn't have at this present time, and therefore those behaviors go away. Okay, so what are those behaviors? So there's basically brain circuitry problems that lead to these behaviors. Now, in this day and age of blood tests and CT scans and MRIs, I frequently get asked, like, if we do a CT scan or an MRI, will that be different? Can we do a blood test? In fact, on Tuesday night, I gave a big talk among physicians, a huge gathering of physicians in South Bay, and they all said, like, can we do an MRI or a CT scan? That is a fundamental misunderstanding of how the brain works. The brain is fundamentally a completely different organ than the rest of our body. So we have a kidney problem, we have a heart problem, we have a lung problem, we have an intestinal problem, and the doctor orders CT scans and MRIs and blood tests and diagnoses. The brain doesn't work that way. The brain is an electrical organ. Okay? The brain is the most complicated computer that there is. And the brain is not even a uniform blob of jello. like somebody would like you to believe. The brain actually has many, many different centers, each of which communicate with each other in a very detailed way to make us able to do the functions we do. The brain is full of about 85 billion nerve cells. 85 billion. Okay. Which you think like there's a lot. Actually, in comparison, octopus, pretty simple animal, right? Has 500 million nerve cells in its nervous system. Even the octopus who can sense food or danger and move its tentacles around and all that needs about 500 million nerve cells to be able to do that. And of those 85 billion nerve cells that our brain has, each of those brain cells connect electrically to 2 to 5 million other brain cells. So that's how complicated the electrical circuitry of the brain is. And even though it is a computer, it is very different from these computers as we know it, because these computers work on an on-off switch circuitry. In fact, most tech companies, Google, Apple, Microsoft, currently have a department that's working on the science of the brain, because they want to understand how this works so that they can develop the next generation of artificial intelligence, or AI. What the brain does is actually sends signals down several pathways and then optimizes the most effective pathway. That's why the brain is actually slower than the computer, but yet more efficient and smarter. Okay? And when different parts of the brain are not communicating well with each other, then the child lacks some developmental skill sets that then leads to the behaviors that we call autism. And we now understand that about 8 to 12 different brain center, the communication between 8 to 12 different brain centers are not the best, which is what leads to the problem. And that's for various different reasons. And I don't want to get too detailed into that, because that's not, you're not a neuroscientist. Even though I could spend hours and hours. You're here to learn what, as a parent, you could do to help your child. Anyways, the behavior, and it's fine. Yeah. So the behaviors of autism start manifesting by 6 months of age. 6 months of age. What are those behaviors at 6 months of age? It's been actually pretty well scientifically studied now. First of all, I wanted to say that everything I talk about, I have a science background. I have a molecular biology research background. And so frequent question parents ask me is like, doctor, what's your opinion? I always say, I have zero opinion. Everything I talk about is based on science, okay? By 6 months of age, a baby develops the ability to communicate reciprocally. Okay? Some babies actually develop that as early as 2 months of age. Just the other day, I was checking on a 2-month-old baby, and it was fascinating to watch. The mother and the father are talking to me, and the baby is laying there waiting to be paid attention to. Then the mother turns to the baby and starts talking to the baby. That's when the baby starts smiling. And then the baby smiles, then stops, and then makes a noise. And then the mom smiles and talks. And they're having a conversation. And then the mother then turns and looks at me and talks, and then the baby again stops and waits for the turn when, there you go, here we are. Thank you for having her. You are demonstrating this right there, live, right? So, as I said, problems of function of several brain centers. It's not the function of the individual brain center itself, it's more has to do with the connectivity of the different areas of the brain with each other. I like to call the brain the pentagon of our body, that it has several different offices that must work intricately together and communicate with each other very effectively to make the rest of our body function. On an average, everything we do, here I'm standing here, I'm talking to you, you're listening, you smiled, you laughed, everything we do each and every of those individual things we do involves about 4 to 5 different brain centers working together. And currently we actually have science to track those electrical signals to the brain as it travels from one part of the brain to another, to another, to another, as the body does a function, including having a thought and a feeling. And they happen very fast in the brain, but now with computer technology, we can actually slow it down to the point that we can actually, in real time, follow the path of an electrical signal through the brain for everything we do. Okay? It's actually fascinating science. This is a very elementary view of the most important structures of the brain that are implicated. Of these, I will just focus on some of the very important ones. This one is very important, cerebellum. Is there anyone in the room who thinks Darwin was wrong? I just want to be respectful of if anybody feels like, because in the United States, 2/3 of the population apparently thinks Darwin is wrong. It's not funny. This is the country we live in, so we have to be respectful. Okay, all right. So the reason I bring that up is because all mammals have this part of the brain, the cerebellum. And this is the most ancient part of the brain. Like even lower animals have this. This is what is unique to humans, the frontal cortex, right? So as the cerebellum developed, and as we evolved into higher functioning mammals, the cerebellum also grew. And what the cerebellum does is actually sends connection to every other part of the brain and controls it with the brain. It's like the regulator of the rest of the brain. So in autism, this connection of the cerebellum to the rest of the brain is frequently off. Okay? And that's why then the brain is not always well regulated. Okay? Now, that's not a hopeless situation, as ESDM research shows, that as a child undergoes early start Denver model treatment along with multidisciplinary OT, PT, speech, behavior, and early education intervention, the brain actually starts to rewire itself. The brain is an amazing organ, and it totally rewires itself, and giving the child the skill sets that was missing, and therefore ends up with the behaviors fading away. So that's kind of the brain basis of how this whole thing works. So cerebellum is one. Corpus callosum, that helps connect the right and the left side of the brain. Frequently a problem in kids with autism. Again, as you can imagine, if the left doesn't talk to the right and the right doesn't talk to the left, then all these functions that we do is not always very efficient. Okay? Another fascinating part of the brain that is frequently off in kids with autism is the hippocampus. It makes it possible to remember new information and recent. The hippocampus is the brain's internal video recorder. Okay? So if you all, can I ask everybody to close your eyes for 5 seconds? All right, okay, so you close your eyes for 5 seconds, and in that time, you could actually, in your mind, play a little video of this talk from start to beginning, right? You actually have a video of what is going on here. The brain records everything. If we didn't have a hippocampus, we would not have invented the video recorder. We understand that it is possible to record things, and that's why we invented it. This is a very unique part of our brain. Lower mammals do not have it as complex as we do. We actually record everything. And that's how we learn. Because we record everything, and we even edit it, meaning that we forget the things we don't want to remember, and then remember the things we remember. And that's how a child learns, really. Watches other people around them do things, adults and kids, and then starts to imitate those behaviors and then learn. Now, as you can imagine, if the hippocampus is not working optimally, then the child will have a difficulty with learning. Again, ESDM helps rewire the hippocampus too. So that's how powerful the hippocampus, the ESDM technique is. Next. So all of these issues with the brain are actually present at birth. Like I said, the science is already there. We just don't have the capacity to apply it en masse to every newborn that's born, but that's where the science is going. And therefore, autism is not caused by the measles vaccine or anything like that. If anybody has any concerns about that, then talk to me later. And at this time, we have the ability to diagnose starting from 12 months of age, the testings that we have, but that will all change in the next 10 years. And that's to give you a perspective. My first patient with autism 20 years ago was diagnosed when he was 16. Now, so a little description of my first patient. He was 16 years old. He was taller than me, and he was not toilet trained. He had 0 words, and all he did was ee. And the only reason his parents had already given him up because they couldn't take care of a 16-year-old able-bodied, big, strong person who is constantly banging his head on the wall and all that. But the only reason he used to come to my office is to get tranquilizer shots so that he wouldn't go amok in the residential care he was put in. And he used to be dragged into the office by 4 to 5 able-bodied people like a cow. Okay, and that is 20 years ago. We have in 20 years come a long way. We have developed ESDM, we have developed early diagnosis, and how I no longer have patients like those. So it's really wonderful there where we have come from those days. Okay. And if enough centers in the brain are not affected, like I said, on an average, the research shows that about 8 to 12 different centers of the brain have to not be communicating optimally. But not always does it happen that way. Some kids are born with maybe some centers of the brain a little off. Then behaviors consistent with autism don't occur, but you still have developmental delay. You can have isolated speech delay. You can have isolated motor delay. You can have other things. But autism is kind of like the perfect storm where there's fine motor skill issues, social skill issues, cognitive issues, and speech issues. But the good news is that it's all fixable by rewiring the brain. Okay, next. So thus comes early start Denver model. And one thing about the early start Denver model is that it is not rigid. So I just have at work a new student, and she's just started today working with me, and she has a long experience with ABA therapy that she's been doing, and now she's working with me. And the first comment she made as I was explaining to her about ESDM and because of her experience with ABA, it's like, oh, this looks like so much fun. This is all play-based. And of course, because we still, from the insurance point of view, we still do ABA. But the hope is that you guys will get trained in ESDM and therefore be able to work with your ABA provider. And most ABA providers now know about ESDM, so they're flexible and they're eager to learn. They're passionate about what they do, and so you'll have a wonderful collaboration with you being very experienced and trained in ESDM, working with your ABA provider to have a better experience. Okay. And so ESDM is play-based. It's the one and only most cutting-edge effective treatment of autism. The best time to start is at 12 months, but sometimes it's not always possible to be that way. And then some therapies like physical and occupational therapy can be appropriate even at an earlier age. And what it does is it repairs the defective connections in the brain. And is also what is unique about ESDM is that it implements those skill set development in the brain in an appropriate sequence. This is actually very important, meaning from easy to hard. I always like to give the example of us all one day in the past learn how to drive. We didn't go on the freeway and drive at 60 miles an hour on day one. We learned how to start the car, then we learned how to put the brakes on, then we learned how to hit the gas and then turn and do all those things. And it was like 6 to 9 months later that we finally made it to the freeway. And so that's how the brain develops the skill sets. Basic stuff first before more complicated things. And as a parent, sometimes it's natural that I want my child to do this and this that he or she is not doing. Well, hold on. You have to slow down, and that's what the ESDM curriculum checklist guides you in a very stepwise fashion. So the ESDM curriculum checklist is not a random list. It is the work of close to, I'm told, 500 different developmental neuroscientists around the country who very methodically arranged those skill sets in the way the brain acquires them. Meaning simple circuits first before more complicated circuits. It's kind of like I spent many years coaching soccer, and when I used to coach like 5-year-olds soccer, and the parents would be like, well, my son can't kick the ball. And then the first thing I would ask is, can he or she stand on one foot? A lot of times the kids who can't kick at 5 have a trouble with balance and can't stand. Well, as you can imagine, if you can't even stand on one foot, then you cannot kick. So then I would spend time with that kid in developing that balance, helping the parents, and work on the balance. Once the balance improves, then the kid can kick. It's like, wow, magic happened. So it's kind of like that. The basic skills first, then more complicated skills. And that's how the brain acquires those. And that's actually the biggest difference from ABA. So as you work with your ABA therapist, introduce the ESDM curriculum checklist with your ABA provider and start to collaborate well. Most ABA providers nowadays are pretty flexible in that area. Okay, next. Why does ESDM work? So the simple answer is that it makes it fun for the kid. Okay, it's play-based, and therefore the child is motivated, and therefore it becomes fun for not only the child but also as you as a parent. You become a parent to have fun with your child, and so ESDM helps you in how to have fun with your child while instilling all these skill sets that your child is missing. And the curriculum checklist identifies the challenge, the holes in that whole skill set list, and it is based in that sequential development of from easy to hard, and therefore keeps the child motivated to progress on. Because if you start with something hard, the child is not motivated, because then the child is kind of fails and no, I'm not doing that anymore. So you start with easy and then you build it up to hard. And this is something that we will drill into your heads over and over again, this easy to hard concept. The moment your child, if you get the sense that, this is not working, it's too hard, get down to easy and get that buy-in, make it fun, and then again, slowly push the limit. So easy to hard, back and forth, so that your child is constantly motivated and you're having lots of fun. And it involves parents, which is the most powerful thing. Before the start of ESDM, there was no structured way for parents to participate in their child's treatment. ESDM makes that possible. And everybody has the Orange Book, right? Yes. They're excellent. The Early Start for a Child with Autism. It gives you play ideas, and then the positive reinforcement so that the child remains motivated. This motivation is very important in learning. We cannot learn anything unless we are motivated and engaged. It's true for adults, it's true for babies and kids. Okay. Yeah. No, it's fine. Oh, so yeah, maybe one more thing in the last slide. This is very important also about the ESDM, that kids actually learn from other kids. That's how they learn. So we at School of Imagination really follow that. And ESDM also emphasizes that kids be introduced to an environment where they're hanging out with other kids. And that's why starting early makes it possible. You know, it's difficult for a 12-year-old to hang out with other kids if they have not. But you know, at that age, in the preschool years, they can hang out with other kids and have fun, and then learn from it. What the ESDM does is actually gives them the skill sets to learn from other kids and adults, so that they can keep learning, not just from therapists and parents, but also from other kids. And that's very important to help develop the imitation skills that we were talking. Somebody brought that up. Next. Any questions at this point? Anybody? Yes.
How important is it to perfect those basic skills before you move forward? So I feel like sometimes with the ABA, they're like, oh, see, she does that, and you're kind of looking like, barely, you know? So, and then they're moving on to the next skill set.
So the ABA provider, and that's actually the single most important concept. That's a good question. The most important concept of ABA that's in ESDM is called data. And ABA providers take data. And what data is what percentage of the opportunities available for the child did the child do it? And usually ABA providers, and same thing for ESDM also before you move up to the higher level, is typically about 80%. So if the child is doing something about 80% of the time, then that's considered doing. Now, you're not a trained ABA provider. You may be a math person, but if you get fixated on these kinds of statistics, you lose the point. Instead of having fun with the child, you'll be like, oh, did he do it or not? You know, you're missing the point. Your whole point is to have fun with your child, right? So that's why I like to simplify it as, is your child doing it rarely, sometimes, or often? Most parents have that sense, and usually often corresponds to about 70 to 80% of the time. Okay, so if your child is doing it often, then you can move on to the higher level, right? But the ABA provider actually has data to show you that your child is doing it often. Yes?
I have a question. So what is this, like, when I was like researching about autism and everything, everyone I kept seeing was like regressive autism, like, oh, your child is fully normal, and then at one day all of a sudden they just turn into a completely different child. Like, and that's like confusing for me because this seems, and this actually makes more sense than like regressive autism in theory, because this shows that a child is born a certain way, and as they get older and they're expected to gain skill sets and social interactions, like the scenario you were telling me about that baby, I can totally completely tell the difference between Ibrahim, my eldest one, was 3 months old. My 3-month-old is having conversations.
Right, exactly.
Pauses,
Yeah.
he waits for
Sure,
me, and we
sure.
go back and forth. Whereas my other one, he would just stare at me.
Right.
You know? And aside from that communication, he doesn't have sensory issues, he doesn't have any of those things, but I can see that communication. So what is regressive autism? Is that a real thing, or is that?
So first of all, and please don't take it personally, okay? We encourage everybody to get off the internet.
Yeah.
Okay, you're wasting your time. Because Dr. Google is bad doctor. It is all kinds of lay people putting garbage in the internet, and then you spend hours and hours reading it, and then you drive yourself into a tizzy. You're wasting your time and effort, and then emotionally getting baggaged. You want to move forward with ESDM, okay? So,
I stopped doing it because I started crying more after reading all that. You lose your mind.
I know.
It's like a bathroom wall. Anybody can write anything on it.
Right.
Yeah. No,
so having said that, now let's move on to your question.
Yes.
So you're right that every kid who is destined to have eventually autism behaviors will show manifestations very early on by 6 months of age of not communicating by body language pretty early on. Having said that, kids can sort of move forward in their development up to a certain point, somewhere between either 12 to 15 months or closer to 2 years of age, and then all of a sudden seem to lose the skill sets they had and kind of backpedal. That is statistically roughly about a third of the kids with autism, meaning that not every kid with autism has show that regression. Historically, that very regression between 12 to 15 months of age is the basis of blaming the measles shot, because the measles shot is given between 12 to 15 months of age. So as a parent, it's logical to make that connection that my child got the measles shot and then he lost everything and then he has autism. But extensive studies around the world by the World Health Organization across all cultures, countries, and everywhere, thousands and thousands of kids being studied with and without the measles vaccine. The incidence of autism is no different. It doesn't matter. So nobody really has a clear understanding of why this loss of skill sets, the so-called regression, happens. But the current thought is that when the connectivity within the different departments of the brain are not working very optimally, and the child is now under pressure to acquire higher skill sets, that it slips, okay, and starts to seemingly regress. It's kind of like the gear of your transmission slipping. Yeah, that's kind of it. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Next. So screen time is a huge issue. This is an official American Academy of Pediatrics recommendation, irrespective of a diagnosis, meaning even for typically developing children, and kids in the spectrum are particularly vulnerable to screen time brain damage. In simple language, screen time under the age of 3 causes brain damage. If you look at the research, it's actually pretty scary. Okay, I'm not going to go into the details of the research, but yes.
Are you talking about how the brain, I guess, it can rewire itself? Like after you cut screens, like how long does it take for the brain to like correct from the damage that was caused?
There's no time. No, it's not like you stop smoking for 10 years and therefore your lung cancer risk went down by a certain percent. There's no such time that way. It all depends on what else is going on with the child in terms of ESDM, other therapies. So that's what is very important. Yes.
Actually, after cutting down screen time, I used to give only half an hour because with my son it was always feeding. He's potty trained, he can tell me everything, but with eating, his habits were not correct. So feeding my twins with no help, so that's the time they used to watch, that half an hour. I cut down that. It's been 3 weeks now, and he's showing a lot of progress.
Yes. Yes, and I hear that story over and over again. And this screen time recommendation is a standard recommendation for all kids, not just for kids in the spectrum. And the research behind it is pretty scary. Okay. And especially important for kids in the spectrum to not have screen time. Okay.
Or a little bit is okay.
In the beginning, not at all. And when it starts, the American Academy of Pediatrics makes a clear distinction between the quality of the screen time. It has to be educational, and in this case, the AAP actually made a very clear recommendation of PBS programming.
My daughter talks to Sesame, so I mean, like,
Right.
her language
Right.
is jumping.
Yeah.
Right. So PBS, as opposed to the Cartoon Channel and other
that's
channels.
always
So that's number one. Number two, the AAP makes a huge distinction between what is called immersive screen time versus interactive screen time. Immersive screen time is, I am tired, here's your TV, I now need to be on Facebook because my friends are waiting, and I have 10 million texts to answer, don't bother me. That is immersive screen time. Interactive screen time is actually you put the Facebook away and your Snapchat and your Instagram and sit with the child and you're interacting with the child while the screening time is happening. So immersive screen time, always bad, okay, period. Interactive screen time is what should happen. For even typically developing children, their recommendation after 3 years of age is X number of minutes per week equals to number of minutes, or X number of minutes per week on the screen equals to age in years. So that would be 3 years of age and 3 hours of screen time per week, and that translates to about half an hour a day. But that's for typically developing children. For kids in the spectrum, about half of that. Okay, so you want to be fully on your way to interactivity before you introduce screen time, and then be very engaged during the screen time so that you're like, if you're watching Sesame Street, watch it together and talk to your child during the screen time. Frequently pause. So actually it's better that you have it on recorder so that you can stop and have a frequently stop and it's like, this is what happens, let's sing the song, let's dance together, and that way develop some interactivity using the programming, which is very therapeutic. Next.